To start all of our presentations, we like to acknowledge that Royal Roads University lives, learns, and works on the traditional lands of the Kusepsum and Lekwungen families. There is a long history of teaching and learning on these lands, and we are so respectful and fortunate for our place within that now. We are here today to chat about our Master of Arts and Graduate Diploma in Human Security and Peacebuilding. My name is Selena Kunar, and I'm an Education Advisor here at Royal Roads University, and joined by some experts who will tell us more about the program, starting with Dr. Kenneth Christie. Ken, would you like to give a short introduction?
Yes, hi everyone. My name's Ken Christie. I'm the program head for the Human Security and Peacebuilding program, and I'm a professor at Royal Roads University. I've been here for about 10 years, and like to welcome you to the webinar, and hope you enjoy it, hope you learn something. And also, if you have any questions, feel free after the webinar, of course, to either write to us directly or pass on your questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful, Ken. Thanks so much. We are also so excited to be joined by one of the alumni of this program, so Stephanie Perham. Stephanie, would you like to give a short introduction?
Hello, everyone. I'm the reporting officer at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Representation Office in Kampala, Uganda. I manage fundraising and accountability to donor governments for the largest refugee operation in Africa and the third largest in the world. I've been doing this since I've graduated from Royal Roads in 2009, and I'd like to tell you about my journey.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so looking forward to getting to know you more as we move through the webinar. We do have some folks joining us as well that you may be able to see, but you'll definitely be seeing our chat box. So I'm joined by Alana McConaughey, who is also an education advisor, who's helping out today to manage any tech challenges that we might face. Also joined by Bev Hill, one of our enrollment advisors, who will be in our chat box, popping in helpful links and answering any questions that come up. And Brett, who's a program coordinator within the School of Humanitarian Studies. So thank you all for joining us. And please, if you feel comfortable, pop an introduction in our chat box so everyone today can get to know you as well. Now that we've learned a little bit about who all of us are, we would love to know more about all of you. So if you feel comfortable in the chat box, letting us know where are you joining us from? What brought you to this webinar today? What sector you're working in? Anything you'd like to share, we would love to read. So while that's coming in to the chat box, I'll just quickly outline how we're going to spend our time together today. So we'll pop next to the Royal Roads University experience, chat about the program itself, hear more from Stephanie about how the program got her to, or helped her get to where she is today and all the wonderful things she's doing within her role. And then of course, touch in on the application process. There will be time for questions at the end of the webinar today, but please, as things come up, pop them in the chat box and we'll be happy to answer them. So starting with some of the things that we value on our campus, that begins with all of you. I'm looking to the side here at where the chat box is positioned for me, and I see that we're joined by folks from Victoria, Campbell River, in Nigeria, Sault Ste. Marie, folks who are working in the Canadian Navy, international relations undergraduates. We have folks from all over the world joining us today in all different sectors. So please continue to pop your information into our chat box because it's so exciting to see who's joining us. I think the chat box already is such a wonderful representation of the diversity we see in our classrooms from this program. Folks who've grown up all across the world, representing all sorts of professional sectors. So thank you all so much for joining us. You'll notice at Royal Roads, it's first names first. It's very important to us that from folks you meet, such as myself, while you're interested in the program, to Bev, who helps you out with answering any questions, to Rhett, who supports you in the program, your teaching teams like Ken, and your cohort members or alumni like Stephanie. All of us are here to understand how can we help you along your educational journey? How can we make sure that this journey is specialized wholly for you? And that begins by learning your first name. Alana, one of the wonderful support members on this webinar, she's on her second degree at Railroads and still doesn't know her student number. I think that's such a beautiful example of the high touch experience we're able to provide here at Railroads. Next are real world classrooms. We're very fortunate to have faculty like Ken leading the charge who are what we call scholar practitioners. So not only academic experts in the field, but those who are out in the world putting into practice what they're bringing into our classrooms. This ensures that the education we provide is always relevant, always applicable, and always up to date with what's going on in the world. Learning together forever. This is in reference to our cohort learning model. Here at Railroads, most of our programs subscribe to the cohort learning model, which means you begin your program with a carefully selected group of individuals, and you actually move through your whole program together, all the way through to convocation. This is such a defining aspect of our programs, because not only are you able to build these academic supports, meet new friends, but upon graduation and through your journey, you actually build these very diverse and deep professional networks as well. And finally, life is also an education. We'll touch on this as we go through the application process, but here at Railroads, it's not only your professional background that we're interested in, or your academic background, or your personal background. We're interested in all of you, and that's something we highlight in our admissions models. It's also important to us not only what you're learning, but where you're learning as well. We're very fortunate to be a Changemaker Campus. We earned this designation from Ashoka University because here at Railroads, all of the education we provide and what you'll see in all the different works coming from our students, so their thesis, their major project, their research components, they're all set up to address problems in the world, activate others, and take action for the good of all. So if you're interested in learning more about what makes Railroads a Changemaker Campus, you can always head to our website. This is the beautiful lands that Railroads University occupy. Of course, in the midst of the global turbulence we are all experiencing, many of us have not had the opportunity to be back on these grounds for a while now. But we like to just highlight what you can expect to see when we are able to reconvene on the university's physical location. Something that's also important for us to share, in particular for this program, is while we do have a wonderful and beautiful physical presence, we have been part of the online learning world for over 25 years. So not only do we have the pedagogy, we have the technological capacity to be creating these change-making learning environments on our physical campus, but in our online classrooms as well. And that brings us to talking about the program itself. So Ken, I will turn the proverbial mic over to you.
Thank you. Well, I know a lot of you are interested in why would you study human security and peace building? Why would you want to take a program like this? And I think possibly because the humanitarian crisis around the world and the human security and vulnerability of people has never been probably more exposed in history than at the moment. And of course, with the new spread of the pandemic, COVID-19, human security is increasingly relevant to the way we look at problems and the way we try and resolve conflicts. So in human security and peace building, we're sort of responding to the increasing demand for leadership in humanitarian assistance, in social reconstruction, in conflict management and peace building, in international contexts and of course in domestic contexts, which are becoming more and more relevant. We view peace building in the program as a kind of broad concept which emphasizes social transformation. It integrates short-term development initiatives into long-term sustainable peace processes. What we have throughout the program is a series of learning outcomes, and our school, which is known as the School of Humanitarian Studies, has harmonized 5 of these learning domains across all of our programs. And these are critical thinking, communication, research, professional knowledge, and professional skills and practice. So these are like the 5 domains that we focus on, and we, of course, they're all domains that can be integrated into one another. So to try and give you an overview of what we're really doing in Human Security and Peacebuilding program, and we have 2 basic programs here. One is the Master of Arts degree, which most people are interested in taking. It's a 2-year program and it has 36 credits. It's online with 3 residencies, which are 2 of these are mandatory 2-week residencies, and 1 is an elective 1-week residency. So most people actually typically go for the 2 mandatory 2-week residencies. Of course, as COVID-19 develops and we're unable to have students on campus, but as you know, things are changing rapidly. We have a great capacity, a great adaptability to adapt the residencies into mainly online courses as well. So it's not been a problem so far with us at Raw Roads because we are mainly an online university, although of course the blended component is very important. And the second part of the program is a graduate diploma in Human Security and Peacebuilding. It's 1 year, it's 18 credits, it's online with 1 residency, that's 1 mandatory 2-week residency. So you come to Raw Roads and you meet your fellow students and you work together in a cohort as your cohort, and that's very important to us, of course. So the blended program in that sense, this is what we call a blended program because it offers you a mixture of online learning and face-to-face learning. And as I say, we have had to adapt to this somewhat, and we're still uncertain because of the evolving situation with COVID-19, of course, as just about every other university in Canada is trying to adapt to this platform now also. But in terms of online learning, the platform that we use is Moodle 3.2. We have a computer help desk, of course, which guides you through all of this online learning, and you will be given instruction in this. We have a very good library, which contains article databases, statistics and data, thesis and major projects, and films and ebooks. And what we find is that the librarians here and the staff are incredibly helpful in getting you through your program, because we at Raw Roads see ourselves as much more relational to the students. That is, you may go to big universities and you may feel that you're just another number, but at Raw Roads, we really do interact with the students in a very close up way in that sense. And you know, we get to know you, we get to know your needs, and we really help to get you through the program and to work with you in that sense. So the support services, I have to say, are really tremendous in also working with you at Raw Roads. And the second part of that is, of course, that we have an on-campus residency where you come to campus, as I say, for 2 weeks. there's full-time learning. You have 2 classes a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. You stay on campus and you get to know your cohort. Now, the completion options, what happens is that basically during the first year of study, all students will take the same set of courses. During the second year, however, students can select from different options to complete their degree. And there are 3 basic different options. The first is a thesis track where you're expected to write a thesis, and basically you will have to maintain a good GPA to get into the thesis. You'll have to apply to the thesis track because we want to make sure that you're going to do something that's really, really vital and important to the program and to your work and to your career. So we have given out a lot of advice on that, and we do find quite a few people taking the thesis track. That's also a good option if you want to go on and say complete a PhD, for instance, or a doctorate at a later stage. The second option is course-based track, and basically it's all the courses in the program. You simply go through the program, take courses, and a lot of people prefer to do it that way as well. They don't necessarily want to go on to another piece of higher education, and that's fine. And the third option is a course-based track with an internship where you can spend up to maybe 4 to 6 months working with an organization, either in Canada or overseas. Many students like to go overseas and work in internships. And we've had a lot of students working all over the world, in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, and even in Europe, doing internships with organizations that have got humanitarian goals and see themselves as that. So I think what we'd like to do now is like to move on to one of our most famous alumni, I would have to say, Stephanie Perham. And I've known Stephanie for many years since I started teaching at Raw Roads, although Stephanie graduated, I think, the year before I joined Raw Roads. And I've met her in Uganda. I know of her work because I follow her work on by email, by social media platforms, etc. And it's, you know, always incredible to see how impressive the students are that come out of the program at Raw Roads, what they do, and how we kind of perhaps help them to fulfill their goals and ambitions in life. And I won't say too much because Stephanie can explain herself far better than I ever could, and I'll give her the chance to tell us about her experience, which is, you know, an incredible one and a wonderful one. And thank you for joining us, Stephanie.
I was muted. Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Selena, for the introductions. I was a graduate of Carleton University's political science program, which benefited greatly from the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs professors at the time. I studied war, so I was fascinated with war and, you know, why humans have wars and what are the outcomes of wars and what are all the different variables involved in, you know, the causes of war. But I didn't think, you know, so strongly about, well, what do we do after the war? What about the civilians, you know? And so more and more as I went through that program at Carleton, I realized, you know what, I'm more interested in how to help and protect the civilians, and what is human security and how do we protect people forced to flee from extreme violence. So at that time, Royal Roads was sort of coming up with this program, and I heard about it, I knew about it, and I knew that I wanted to study in it. But having been a public servant in Ottawa, I had never really been anywhere. I hadn't left North America, and I thought, you know, I'm not qualified to join this program. So I went out and worked a little bit in the world, and in Asia, in China and Korea as a teacher, to get some kind of background outside of Canadian life. And I applied for the program, and I was worried that I wouldn't get in because I didn't have this, you know, qualification. At the time, many of the students were Canadian Forces members, or they had that experience with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police as observers or things like this. So I thought, well, how can I fit in with this group? But I knew when the program started that I was in the right place right away. My peers came from many different backgrounds, and, you know, not only the forces, also policing. Some were teachers, some were social workers, there was a psychiatrist. And one of the brightest students among us was actually a landscaper from Victoria. And, you know, she was just so well read and witty that she kept us all on our toes, I must say. So yeah, I did take a break between 2002 and 2007, so a 5-year break before I started my master's program. And, you know, I was a bit afraid, but after the first day, it was such a welcoming process there in Hatley Castle that I thought, oh yeah, this is where I'm meant to be. I fit in with these people. These are actually my peers. But what was so great about it was that everyone had such a different background. And when we were doing the online coursework, many of us were in different parts of the world. I had actually gone back to Korea to do the online coursework. Well, some were in Afghanistan. Another I remember was in Lebanon, somewhere in, you know, central Canada, others were in Victoria. So that was really neat too, because we were working, you know, I would do my part when I woke up, and then while I was sleeping, someone else would pick up, you know, and work on the report a little bit more. So in the morning when you woke up, more had been done, you know. And this was an era where we were just starting to use track changes in Microsoft Word. So, you know, some people had to learn how to do that. Now I think I hope that it's fairly obvious that everyone does this kind of stuff now in 2020 in the Zoom world. But yeah, no, it was really wonderful to jump back into school. And I think that the thing I enjoyed most about Royal Roads, not just the campus, the learners, you know, the people, the experience sharing, and the discussions in person in the class, but we also accessed a really good reading library. You know, you're reading the latest cutting edge articles, and you could really search and find what you needed to read and understand, in addition to the required readings. So the discussions and debates that we were having online in relation to the readings were really kind of fascinating and wonderful. So something strange happened. One day in Korea, I was reading this article by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. It wasn't an article, it was a terrible report, actually. And I feel that changed the course of my life. It was, the atrocities described in the report were so horrible that I knew I needed to go to Uganda and actually work there. But, you know, not to work because I didn't have any skills. I just had knowledge and information, but I didn't have that experience. Like, how would I contribute? So I decided, okay, if you're going to go to Uganda, where there's this horrible war in northern Uganda with, I think Jan Egeland, the humanitarian coordinator of the United Nations at the time, said it was the world's worst humanitarian crisis. And yet it was neglected because we didn't know about it. I hadn't heard about it. I didn't learn about it until I started my studies at Royal Roads. And I thought I was, you know, keen on understanding crises and problems in the world and wars. After all, I'd been studying wars 5 years before during my bachelor's studies. So this article really made me realize that I need to go there and learn. I need to understand what is driving human beings to do something like that. And then what's the world doing about it? Obviously, the international community is coming together to do something, but what is that exactly? So with some really good guidance and, careful planning, I ended up going to northern Uganda to just volunteer with an NGO that was seated within the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees office in Gulu in northern Uganda. You have to be a bit brave in this career type. I just walked in and I said, I know what you're doing. I had read and researched about what this NGO was doing. They were a mapping NGO from France called Carte ONG, like map NGO, but in French. And they were doing geographical information systems mapping and data management to try to make sure services were evenly distributed to 250 displacement camps where people were forced to live for a decade. And at this time, they were the 2 million people in these camps were starting to return back home because there was, a little sniff of peace going on in the area. And this was actually the Lord's Resistance Army War, which many of you may have heard about. So what I tried to do in their office not only was to do some of the data analysis myself, but to actually explain what it was that this great NGO was doing, because they were working so hard, they didn't have time to describe what they were doing. And at that time, people were critical of data, people were critical of mapping. And being Canadian, Canada as a country that invented geographic information systems mapping, if you Google it on Wikipedia, it will tell you that. I knew that mapping was the way to go, but others were still, there was a whole school of thought that found it to be useless. They didn't understand the purpose that it could serve in coordination and making sure that people had access to water, access to schools, enough latrines, that the humanitarian standards, the sphere standards, actually were met at these different camp locations. And also based on the number of population returning to certain areas, we would know that it was worth making an investment to go and drill a deep borehole well so that people could access water, because if they accessed water, more people would go home. So I found this very fascinating, and I ended up doing my research project, my thesis on that, using these systems to coordinate programs in a better way. And it's really funny because in 2020, it's obvious that a large-scale humanitarian response needs GIS mapping and data management. It's central, and having an information management team is central to an effective humanitarian response. It's not even something to debate about anymore, but at the time it was, something people weren't sure about and weren't willing to fund. Lo and behold, the same team that I worked with in Gulu, in northern Uganda in 2008 and 9, ended up being the same team that stomped out the Ebola virus in West Africa by mapping out its location for Médecins Sans Frontières. So, these things evolve, and if you can, kind of be visionary and jump in and be willing to volunteer and learn a new career, learn a new way of, engaging in something that you may not understand, you will really benefit greatly. So that was my entry point into humanitarian response. And because this NGO sat inside the High Commissioner for Refugees office, I was offered a volunteership. A UN volunteer position is not a bad thing when you're starting out. And I ended up being the program officer coordinating the return of internally displaced persons in northern Uganda, because I did understand all of the needs after having done the data, the nasty, tough job of analyzing the data sets. And believe me, I was not a data person before I went and did that job. It's a learn on the job situation. I hope I have lots of time, Selena. Maybe I can talk about what I do now, which is much different. Currently, I'm working for the High Commissioner for Refugees in Kampala, same country, but between now and then, I have worked in a number of African countries on various emergency responses and some development programs as well. Currently, Uganda hosts 1.4 million refugees, mainly from South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but also from Burundi, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Somalia, as well as other countries. The operation in Uganda is the global model at the moment. It's the third largest refugee operation in the world, but Uganda's approach to refugee hosting is very different from anything else in the world. Usually, you hear about refugee camps. So you picture fences, you picture areas where people can't leave. They don't have freedom of movement. They don't have the right to work. The services are poor. It's in a borderland, close to a dangerous, country border where a war is ongoing. It's protected by the military. This is the image that a lot of people get especially if you're looking at films. And it's true. It's very real. And I've been in those camps. But Uganda realized back in the 80s that if they allow refugees to settle on larger plots of land, the refugees will become more self-reliant. They'll be able to grow vegetables and maybe even sell vegetables. They might build a workshop. They will definitely feel more comfortable. And Uganda realized that if refugees have freedom of movement and are allowed to go about their country freely without a road pass or some sort of documentation to leave the settlement, they might actually contribute to the economy and even be an economic driver, fostering trade between neighboring countries and contributing to the society as a whole. So Uganda decided to allow refugees to access the same services as its nationals. So instead of having the parallel systems that a camp would provide, meaning a health center for refugees that would be different from the health center accessed outside by nationals who live in the town or around the town. The reason that Uganda chose this approach is that in many refugee hosting situations, the services in the camp, especially in the rural bushlands of Africa, the services in the camp end up being better than the services that the national governments provide. So the nationals want to access the schools in the camp. They want to access the health facilities in the camp and the water systems. And this is a problem for peaceful coexistence. It causes uprisings. It causes violence between refugees and host communities. But when everyone is able to integrate and access the services together, and the services are distributed more evenly, and the quality is good, this reduces conflict significantly. So in, I think it was 2016, before President Obama stepped down, he called for a leaders summit in New York. It was the 78th Leaders Summit of the United Nations General Assembly. And all of the countries in the world were asked by President Obama to reaffirm their commitment to the 1951 Refugee Convention, which avails international protection to people fleeing extreme violence. This is because in Europe, we were seeing fences, we were seeing people who were fleeing terror being blocked. And that's not right. And that's what Obama thought, that now is the time to make a change in the world. So the New York Declaration on Refugees and Migrants was signed as kind of this reaffirmation of their commitments to refugees. Following that, and actually, part of this declaration was a comprehensive refugee response framework. So the annex in this declaration, we call it CRRF. It's a comprehensive response. You think that at this time in the world, we would be good at putting apples and oranges together, but we're not. So on one side, we have humanitarian programs, And we're pretty good at coordinating humanitarian programs by sector, at national level, at camp level, at district level. But development programs, the longer term programs, we're not good at coordinating those. Not only do development programs not coordinate with humanitarian programs, they don't coordinate with themselves. So there's gaps, there's overlaps, there's corruption, there's all kinds of things that can take place when you don't have humanitarian and development worlds collaborating. It's hard to believe that in 2020 this is still a problem. But Uganda has embraced this and said, you know what? We don't want the international community to lead. We're in the lead. The Office of the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Local Government and all the line ministries are in the lead. And yes, High Commissioner for Refugees, you have your coordination model, and we own that. We accept it, we embrace it, but we also want to coordinate the development programs. So this government is doing that, and they're doing it very well. The challenge has been the international community lacks, they're not providing the support that's required. So Uganda has created bridge plans between their, every country has a 5-year development program or plan, a development plan. So they bridge between the National Development Plan 2 and the incoming National Development Plan 3 with these humanitarian response plans by sector. So there's an education response plan, a health response plan, a water plan, an environment plan, an energy plan. And these are costed action plans that are asking different partners to come in and engage in those different locations, to build schools, to build water systems. And we built 100 water systems that each serve over 14,000 people that are piped, and people fetch water from tap stands with jerry cans. We've built thousands of classrooms and serve 101 health facilities. It's a very large operation, but it's not enough. Uganda's not getting the support it needs. So Uganda has gone to the World Bank and is taking out loans to cover these programs that Uganda has designed. Tiny Uganda, a country with 40 million people, of which half the population are 15 years old and under, and 78% of the population are under 30. So I'm actually old here because I'm 41. So I found this really fascinating. But how did I get here? Managing fundraising for such a vast operation and the accountability to the donors. So, right, I have to account for the funds that I negotiate. It's a bit tricky in this kind of environment, but a worthwhile cause. I had joined I was appointed to the High Commissioner for Refugees Emergency Response Team. Some of you may be familiar with the DART of the Canadian Forces, where you have your go bag ready, and they tell you, you have to go now. You go home, you grab your go bag, and you get on a plane, and you go to a country where there's a problem, and you start work. You might be there for 3 months. So I joined that emergency response team of the High Commissioner in 2011, and this picture of me here, wow, I look young. I was actually in Kenya during the Somalia famine. I was managing external relations for the entire operation. Talk about throwing someone into a hot pot of soup. It can happen to you, so be careful what you sign up for. In that year, I had worked from the regional office first in Senegal, in Dakar, to manage information and reports from 14 countries affected by the Ivory Coast War. As soon as the country opened up and the airspace travel resumed, there was a no-fly zone for about a month. I was on the first plane, UN Humanitarian Air Service plane. I think there were 15 seats and there were about 13 of us. So the plane wasn't full, and we were banking in the clouds to enter into Ivory Coast. And I realized, oh, you probably shouldn't have signed up for this. But yeah, so it's really important to be careful in your career path. I was still young though, I was about 30, so it was fun at the time, but it was a war. So you're in a war and you're unarmed. That's always a bit of a challenge, probably. I managed reporting and ended up being the executive assistant to the person coordinating the emergency response on behalf of the United Nations for the country, another Canadian, Dr. Paul Spiegel, who now is on that. If anyone's been looking at the Johns Hopkins University COVID data, he's a key person involved in that. Quite a great Canadian. So after that, I was again deployed to this Kenya operation pictured here, where we had 1,500 refugees coming in every day from Somalia, completely emaciated and famine stricken. We had to relocate them into encampment in a desert that had no services. So that was quite challenging, and we had high-level delegation visits every day on chartered flights. I had to take them out to the field so that they could see. You know, ministers have to come and see for themselves if they're going to allocate $10 or $20 million to a response. They need to verify that the need is real. So they often come on their own. And you have to take them with armed escorts in such a dangerous place. So at that time, the operation was characterized by kidnappings and carjackings coming from Al-Shabaab. It was a bit dangerous. So you have to also be ready for that if you sign up. These kind of things happen, but it's fascinating. To sort of get away from that a bit, I joined Action Against Hunger as a head of office in northern Nigeria in the Sahel region. This was in the time of Boko Haram, but it was before the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. Things worsened and I had to eventually evacuate the office. But we were working on a large-scale nutrition response program because at the time, 500,000 children were dying of malnutrition and its underlying causes in northern Nigeria. So there's a lot of work to do there. It's a really beautiful country. Unfortunately, it's been afflicted by this violence, but it's a wonderful place to be, and I highly recommend taking up any job there. Now that there's peace, it's far more secure now. And after that, I was able to join UNHCR again, return to the UN Refugee Agency, but that time in Ethiopia. So I was seated in Addis Ababa doing the same work that I'm doing now, managing fundraising and negotiating and brokering all of the deals that support the programs that we implement to support refugee service provision and address their basic needs. Ethiopia at the time was the largest operation in Africa. So it's quite complex. It had a triple emergency. So it had Sudanese fleeing in from Blue Nile State in Sudan. It had the current South Sudan war situation where we received 500,000 refugees, mainly of the Nuer tribe, overnight. So the people coming from the oil lands were pushed off of their territory. And we are also receiving Eritrean children. These are the ones who continue on the migration route to Europe. And we would lose about 500 kids every quarter of the year. We just disappearing up these human trafficking and smuggling routes. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things out there for one to get interested in. And you don't necessarily have to put yourself at risk, as I did during the emergency response team deployments. There are a lot of options available where you're, more seated at the desk doing a monthly field visit to check on people, or if you're doing social work, you could be engaging directly with the refugees and trying to understand their challenges, making sure that maybe if you have a legal background, making sure that cases are heard properly and that they access justice, because that's also a very big issue in countries with weak justice systems. Like Uganda's, which they are currently building. There's a great deal of stuff you can really involve yourself in. And I would like to also tell people that I usually take on an intern or research students from Royal Roads to help guide them. And currently I'm looking for research support in the operation so that we can develop various aspects of the body of knowledge on this comprehensive refugee response model in all of the sectors. So everything from water, nutrition, prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, nutrition, access to justice, and almost anything that you can think of, including youth leadership. So I imagine that anyone joining this program would have a background or some kind of linkage to those sectors, or at least interests in it. So if you do, you can feel free to contact me through Ken or Bev or Selena.
Wow, Stephanie, thank you so much for everything that you shared. I found myself, getting a bit lazy on the job because I was so engaged in all of the different experiences you shared with us and the different examples you're able to provide. So thank you so much for that. We'll continue on. We'll quickly touch on the application process, but I know I myself have so many questions, and our participants may as well. So I will guide everyone to our chat box. That this is a great time to be thinking about questions about the program itself, questions for Stephanie, and pop them in the chat box, because we are right around the corner to our Q&A session. So Stephanie, we will hear from you very soon again, I'm sure. Thank you. So how to apply? At Rural Roads, we have two admission models, one being our standard admissions. So standard admissions requires a 4-year or comparable undergraduate degree in a relevant and related field with a minimum GPA of a B+ from a recognized post-secondary institution. Flexible admissions. So flexible admissions is a wonderful opportunity for, as I was reading these standard admissions, for those folks who thought, okay, maybe not me, but I know this program is for me. I know this program will give me so much, and I will be able to give this program so much. So flexible admissions is for folks without an undergraduate degree who normally have at least 10 years of work experience with a minimum of 2 years relevant professional experience in a leadership or management position, or an equivalent combination of education and experience. If we have folks on the line who meet the degree requirement, but perhaps not the GPA requirement, you'll be required to have a minimum 5 years of relevant professional experience. Anyone coming through flexible admissions, to ensure we are setting up for the best success possible through this program, are required to complete the academic writing and critical thinking course. You may see quite a few little stars, little asterisks beside things. And if you head to our website, we have more information about what relevant could entail. What does management position mean? What are all the different things that could fall under that? So I really encourage you to head to our website to get that information. Speaking of our website is a wonderful resource for the application process itself. So while the application process begins with your online application, once that's in, we require some supporting documents. Those supporting documents being your official transcripts, personal statement, 2 letters of reference, and a structured resume. On our website, you'll find great tips and tricks for things like your personal statement. On our website, you'll find some guiding questions to help ensure that all of the information that we're looking for is included in your personal statement. For example, for the structured resume, you will also find some helpful hints as to how you can format this resume to ensure that all of your experiences shine bright. Looking at our coming intakes. So for this program, our next intake begins January 11th, 2021, putting our application deadline to August 31st, 2020. So if you are interested in beginning in January, we highly encourage getting your online application in to ensure that Rural Roads University knows that you're interested. If you're planning a little bit further out, our next intake begins January 10th, 2022, putting its application deadline August 31st, 2021. I like to note here that at Rural Roads, we are always accepting our applications on an ongoing basis. So this means we're not actually going to wait until August 31st, 2020 to assess all applications amongst each other. As you have your online application in, as your supporting documents come in, we are able to adjudicate your file and let you know shortly about your seat in the program. So that being said, programs can fill quickly. So if there is an intake that you're interested in, please connect with Bev, connect with our offices, and we can help support you getting your application completed and submitted. Financial aid. So many of you asked questions about financial aid when registering for this webinar. We have a wonderful financial aid and awards office with specialists who have their fingertips on internal resources, but some external resources as well that you could be eligible for. So we've provided their email address, their website. Those will both be included in the follow-up message going out. And here you can see their direct phone lines. They also have a wonderful blog as well. So lots of different ways to be connecting with this office to ensure that you are connected with the resources that could be useful to you. Enrollment Services. So I can see in the chat box, Bev is already answering some questions. Bev is a beautiful example of our enrollment team here on our campus, eager to help you as you have any questions about this program or others on our campus. You can find Bev and her team at learn.more@railroads.ca. And if you're joining us internationally, you can connect with our international team at learn.more.international@railroads.ca. And that has brought us to the end of the webinar and the beginning of our Q&A session. So I'll stop sharing my screen here. Oh, wonderful, back to seeing everyone's excited faces. So looking at our chat box, we've had some great questions being asked. So popping in here, making sure that we're connecting with all the questions I will ask. I'll just start from the top. So we had a question for you, Stephanie. Do you live in Uganda? Are you currently located there? Oh, and you had responded that yes, you do. Kampala, Uganda. Thank you so much. Okay, another question from Jenna. So for Stephanie or Ken, you're welcome to unmute your mics. Do you see many opportunities for remote workers living in Campbell River who aren't able to relocate overseas long-term, but are willing to do short-term travel? Stephanie, in the chat box, I can see provided some information about looking at CANADEM.ca, as they offer short-term deployments, especially if you have experience doing social work or individual case management. Thank you so much for sharing that resource, Stephanie. A question about our on-campus residency. So which master's program is available for the on-campus component come 2021? Bev in our chat box highlighted that the on-campus residency is scheduled for April 2021, but of course is contingent on the COVID restrictions. Another great question from Jenna. So for Stephanie, Ken, can you provide some examples of human security work opportunities in Canada? Great question.
Do you want us to answer these questions now, Selena? Or?
That would be great, yes.
Well, I wanted to start off with the question about human security work opportunities in Canada, because I realize that not everyone wants to work overseas or do this kind of international career that Stephanie has had. And so there are lots of opportunities working within government and government agencies, because we have lots of human security crises going on in Canada with Indigenous populations, with minority peoples, with homeless peoples. All of these fall under the gamut of human security. And you know, wherever there are vulnerable people, wherever there are pockets of underdevelopment or crisis going on in these areas, there's always human security concerns. I don't think there's an area that's not touched upon by human security. So and I know that Stephanie will agree. You know, I mean, she does this incredible work with putting refugees and displaced persons back into their homes and resolving these conflicts, etc., on a kind of international scale. But we have serious human security problems within Canada and in all of the Western countries, and we have lots of people who are working with people in these kinds of areas, working with NGOs in Canada, working with the United Nations organizations within Canada, working at all sorts of levels to do this kind of work, you know. So there's lots of opportunities here domestically as there are overseas. I think some people probably want to understand the difference between what we do in what we do in human security and peace building and what we do in conflict analysis and management, because that's another program in the School of Humanitarian Studies. And I would say conflict analysis and management is more focused on the internal conflict going on within organizations, particularly organizations within North America, rather than human security peace building, which has more of an international focus. I mean, if you want to see where our students are placed, well, we have many students who have gone on to do highly successful careers in Canada. Another one of our most famous alumni just became last year the MP for Victoria, Laurel Collins. And Laurel Collins, incidentally, was one of Stephanie Perham's interns in Uganda, working with refugees. So how great is that connection? You know, she came home, she had an incredible experience, and she decided to work in human security areas within Victoria and within British Columbia. And she has now gone on to do great work in politics, you know. So we have all these great connections. We have a lot of alumni who have gone on to do work. They wanted to continue and do their PhDs and go on teach in universities, work in universities, or work with government or work with NGOs. But the sky is the limit in terms of career opportunities. I mean, I've just talked to another alumni of Royal Roads who has moved her position. She was working in Bangkok for the United Nations with sex trafficking running through Thailand. She did a very successful job with that. And she moved to Nepal when she was working for the United Nations Small Arms Reduction Unit in Kathmandu and did an incredible, and now she's been offered a job with the OSCE in Warsaw, Poland. So she's traveling all over the place doing this. And if you're really into that, that whole world can open up to you and do that. But equally, if you want to stay in Canada and North America, there's fantastic opportunities that come up. So, you know, I don't know if Stephanie wants to elucidate a little bit more on that, but that would be my take.
I would just like to add in, Ken, that the conflict analysis aspect of the program, I mean, this was something completely new to me when I joined. I felt that from the different models that we were exposed to, I was able to look at the root causes of problems or any kind of challenge that we, you know, were given various examples and had to work together in groups to try and solve problems and come up with a whole approach as to how you would maybe engage on a realistic situation in a location. You know, there were various types And I found, this was something I'd never been exposed to before, but it really helped shape my critical thinking and my ability to, solve problems. So, I know that one of my successes now, and the reason I'm good at what I do, is because I love, the challenge of solving problems, and I have these, tools on hand that most of which I got from Royal Roads, because I didn't have those skills before I joined the program. And I think they're applicable to everything. I mean, every day-to-day life. And also, I'm just trying to think of a lot of context in Canada. Maybe if you were working with youth in the city, or if you were working with refugees who are being settled in Canada, or with northern communities, or even I think if you were working in a company and you had maybe a specific role in human resources dealing with challenges between different parts of the company, I think it fits almost everywhere.
Thank you so much for that, Stephanie. That was my question in my head. I thought, wow, what was salient in this program for you that has kind of helped you continue on, so many years later, through all of the different things that you're doing. So that's really cool to hear. Thank you so much. Popping back into our chat box, we had a question for you, Stephanie. So Sarah had shared, thank you for sharing. It's very inspiring and helps with mapping my own trajectory. What skills did you need for the data analysis role? Also, how important is it to know more than one UN official language if one aspires to work at one of the UN offices?
I think I have the answers for those. With the data analysis, when I joined KPMG, I actually had very limited skills. And I told them that, if I can do data entry, I can learn how to do different things. And I worked for a really tough French guy. He'd been working for the European Space Agency before, founding this NGO. And the woman that I worked for had worked for the German Space Agency. So they were brilliant. And I was worried, like, I'm going to disappoint these guys because my skills with, of course, it's mainly a Microsoft Excel based skill when you're doing data analysis and budgeting. Of course, the two, they go hand in hand, I really think. Doesn't matter what the data is that's in there. You got to learn the formulas. But the great thing about Excel is that you can Google how to do anything and you'll get back in those days, you didn't get too much stuff, but now you can have different types of voices from different cultures, different languages. You can have it as a YouTube, you can have it as a text. And I found he would even tell me, you need to install this .dll. I'd be like, I don't know what that is. And I'd Google it and find it and figure out how to install it. So I think these days, Excel is a fabulous tool, and it doesn't hurt. I mean, there's free courses online, there's other courses you can sign up for, but if you find that using Excel is a gap, it's really good and very complementary to this type of program to go into the workforce with basic Excel skills. You should be able to put a budget in there. You should be able to input data on beneficiaries and maybe do a little analysis on a chart that has 10 columns and 8 rows maybe, and chart a little graph. But it's all almost automated now. You just click pie chart and whoo, there's your pie chart. It's not as bad as it sounds. Once you get into it and do it for a month or so, you become an expert really fast. You just have to dive in, and that's what I did. And it worked out well for me. Now I'm doing these very large, complex spreadsheets that are a little bit unfun, but the rest of the work is pretty fun. So it's worth it to have to do some ugly stuff, to be able to get to meet with the refugees and hear their stories and help them firsthand. And the other one was UN languages, yes. Up to the officer level, it helps to have 2 languages, but if English is your main language, you're pretty much good to go. It's when you go for the P4, which is a senior officer level, you need to have at least a B2 second UN language. So If you were planning on a career in the United Nations, now would be a good time to start learning, ideally Arabic or French, because that's where you would, those are the languages you would need to use the most at the moment. And you would be able to get there. All of these countries that I've worked in have had an Alliance Française near to the office, and they can even, you can do some online courses, you can do courses in the office as a group, or you can, go over there for evening courses and fit it into your schedule. But you can get quite far as a full officer. I mean, that could be 15 years into your career before you would need the French or Arabic.
Wonderful, Stephanie, thank you. I see we have 2 great questions in our chat box, and we're a bit over time, so I'd love for us to go and chat more about those questions. So I'll just highlight to anyone that does need to pop off, we will be sending out a follow-up message shortly that'll connect you with a link to the recording of today's webinar. So thank you all so much for joining, and we will continue on, and we'll connect back with you when you click on our recording. So heading back to our chat box, I see that we had a question that was answered by Bev, asking more about the 2-week residency. So do people have to stay on campus? Beverly provided some information about on-campus accommodation that is available for these short-term residencies that generally are from $30 to $45 a night plus tax. So if you're interested in more information about the on-campus accommodations available for your learning intensives, connect with Bev, and she's happy to pass more information along. We had a great question about when is a decision expected about if the April 2021 residency will be held on campus or if it'll be going online. And Bev let us know that RU has committed 100% online program delivery until December 2020. So at this point, students should be preparing to come to campus come April, but of course, this will be communicated as soon as possible if things change. So thank you so much for that, Bev. We had a great question here from Justin, who shared a little bit about his background and why he feels this program is a perfect fit, but has a bit of a concern around how much of this program is online based, having never taken an online course before. So Ken, or perhaps Stephanie, from your own experience, can you tell us more about the online learning within this program?
I mean, I can definitely say something about that, Selena, and thanks for the question, because, before I came to Raw Roads as a professor, I had never taught online or actually taken an online course in my life. I worked at a traditional university where I would walk into a lecture room, I would have 250, 300 students, and I would give my lecture after an hour, walk out. And I can tell you that it's a completely different experience. And I have now, after 10 years, come to the conclusion that it's actually a much better experience because I'm more in contact and more engaged with my students than I certainly was when I worked as a professor in a traditional university. So I had to learn very quickly how to teach online, how to work online. And it was an amazing experience because I'd never regarded myself as a very technologically oriented person, but I learned the technology very quickly because it's very easy. It's not difficult. And it's not onerous in that sense. And I think if I can learn it, anyone can learn it, basically. And maybe Stephanie would like to say something about her experience taking an online courses because you were actually the student then, Stephanie.
True, yes, I can. This approach that Railroads uses prepares you for the workforce. In 2007, when I joined, I mean, most people were still in this regular office-based environment. But if you're doing humanitarian work where you are maybe working in the field using a satellite internet connection, and you need to liaise with your country office in the capital city and the regional office, maybe over in Nairobi or Dakar or Bangkok, and your headquarters, which could be in Geneva or New York. You need to be able to work with people who are all over the world all the time. So in this program, you're engaging in debating, discussing, and working on papers jointly with people who are in different locations. You're not together in the same room, and you can't afford to sit around a boardroom table in a government office and take decisions. We don't use Zoom, we use Microsoft Teams, but I'm in Teams calls right now. I mean, I've been working at home since March because we've been in a lockdown in Uganda. But I'll be in a call with people from UNICEF who are in Kampala, people from UNHCR who are based in the field, the headquarters in Budapest, which deals with supply management and procurements, while I have someone also joining the line from the private sector fundraising team in Copenhagen. And we all, work together. You're constantly in contact with people all over the place. So Royal Roads kind of prepares you for that because you're already doing this before you graduate. It's just, of course, not at the intensity level that I'm experiencing now, but it was, it gears you for that. You would have, as I was mentioning, someone who's maybe deployed in Afghanistan joining you by email. I mean, we weren't doing these video calls so much at the time. Now and then we do a Skype call. And I imagine now Zoom would probably be a great connector for students who would be working on a paper together. You just have a quick call, allocate responsibilities, and then each person will work on a different section, do a different reading, and do a different little maybe chart. And if you piece it all together, then you use track changes in Microsoft Word to figure out how to finalize your document before you submit it. Everyone's had a chance to read and comment. I mean, that's everyday regular work in the United Nations. So you're being prepped for that through this type of program. It's very different from that traditional learning in the university, but it's very much 2020, I think.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Ken. Absolutely. This is very different. We like to highlight that our online learning experience is very different from correspondence learning. So you will not be sent, a package, complete it and send it back. It is extremely interactional, not only between you and your faculty or your teaching teams, but your cohort as well. So you have your individual assignments, your team assignments, your weekly forum posts where you're engaging. Many of our courses are asynchronous. So as Stephanie highlighted, there's no one time that you need to be online and in class. Once you're in a group, that is for your group to decide. When you do your readings is for when you to check in and check out. It is self-managed. And of course, there's great positives and great learning opportunities that come with that as well. But our online learning is nothing short of extremely interactional. And I think a great question to end on is from Rachel. So Ken, what do you believe this program can bring to those of us who are currently serving members in the Canadian Armed Forces? Do CAF members often enroll in this program?
Yes, thank you, Rachel, for that question. I mean, it's a really great question. And we do have a lot of members of the Canadian military from the Navy and the Army, and sometimes even the Air Force come into our program. And there's a substantial number who have graduated over the years. They want to learn new skills, skills that they may not necessarily acquire in the military. They want to change their focus around a little bit from the more sort of hard security goals of the military to things like humanitarian assistance, capacity building, etc. But they also get that information and knowledge about what human security is and how it can be applied to peace building, etc. So, as you may know, Royal Roads was a former military college. It's where many of the officers in the Canadian Army went to, and Navy. And, you know, so we have a long-standing tradition with the military, and we work with them a lot in that sense. I don't know if people are familiar with the Canadian Defence Academy, and I have done some work with those groups myself. They're based in Ottawa, and they're very, very interested in the role of human security in conflicts, of course, because you know, this is a changing shape of conflict. This is a changing shape of what's happening in wars and post-war scenarios. How do you reconstruct a country? How do you build capacity? How do you work with society in that sense? So the military role is changing massively, not only in Canada, but of course all over the world. And so I think that we have a lot of people, to answer your question shortly, we have a lot of people coming in from the military, and they go out and they work with, when they're finished, some of them go back into the military and work in this capacity, running operations and peace building, etc. And we have other people who go out and work with international NGOs, and they've got this great experience. I know quite a lot of our former military personnel have worked, for instance, in international election missions. You know, Canada sponsors a lot of observers, etc., for international elections. That's just one of them. I mean, there's hundreds of examples, but we've got a very good record of putting former members and still working members of the Canadian military through the program, and many of them have been highly successful after that. And I think also the great thing, of course, is the Canadian military sponsors quite a lot of funding for education. So I think there's ways to get grants from the Canadian military to help you in your education. That's a really, I mean, that's an amazing thing. I've heard about that from the people who have come through. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. And that brings us to the end of our Q&A session. So I would just like to give a big thank you to Ken and Stephanie for telling us so much about the program and how the program continues on after convocation. And also a big thank you to Bev and Alana for such great supports, and Rhett as well, as we all navigated this webinar together online. If you'd like to hear more about topics that are covered in human security and peace building, we have a webinar coming up on July 22nd, and a registration link will be included in our follow-up. And I see Alana has kindly popped it in our chat box as well. But we have a webinar coming up on, which is titled Rojava and the Kurds, Human Security, Gender, and Peace Building in the de facto region in northeastern Syria. We're very fortunate to be hosting this webinar in collaboration with Koya University, who is located in the Kurdistan region within Iraq. So it should be a very engaging session. So please join us if you are able. Of course, we are all here to answer any questions that come up for those listening to the recording, those kind of continuing to bubble on after we end today. So feel free to hit reply on the follow-up message that is being sent your way, and I'll be sure to pass your questions along to the appropriate contacts. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, and we wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.